Good morning. There is a very interesting halacha that I like discussing before Sukkot because it really frames the whole mitzvah in a very important context and has significant halachic ramifications as well. That is the discussion of what should one be thinking while sitting in the sukkah. Because as we know, typically a there is a machlokas whether or not is required to have kavana for a mitzvah, whether one needs to have intent in regard to performing a mitzvah. And even though we do, especially for mitzvahs midoraisa, assume that one needs to have kavana for a mitzvah, that is referring to the kavana that what I'm doing for a mitzvah. That I'm not simply sitting in the sukkah for shade, but I'm sitting in the sukkah to fulfill a mitzvah. However, that usually does not require any more depth to the kavana. One need not be thinking about the reason of doing a particular mitzvah. But the Bach on the tour does quote that there are a few exceptions. One of those exceptions, he writes, is Sukkah. That Sukkah one actually must have kavana, not only that he is sitting in the Sukkah for the sake of the mitzvah, but also that it is to commemorate the Ananei HaKavod. What's interesting is that the tour does not normally take a stance on a machlokas, which would otherwise seem irrelevant to halacha. But when it comes to sukkahs, he does, because there's a machlokas in the Gemara whether sukkos are keneged sukkos mamish, whether they are to remember actual huts and booths, or whether they are to remember Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory that Hashem protected us with the clouds through the desert. And the Torah, in fact, says that the halacha is that they are keneged Ananei HaKavod, which is a relatively atypical ruling of the Torah, because it would seem to not have halachic ramifications, which is why the Bach says that the reason the Torah takes a stance is because it in fact does, because one needs to have intent when sitting in the sukkah, that for the not only that I'm doing so for a mitzvah, but I'm doing so zecher la'anei hakavod, that I'm doing so as an essential part of the mitzvah. This is based off of, says the Bach, the fact that the pasuk in the Torah, when referring to Sukkos, says "Leman yedu doroseichem ki besukkos hoshafti." It is in order for your generations to know, meaning to say, based off of the pasuk, part and parcel of sitting in the Sukkos is to pass on this Masorah, pass on this commemoration of the protection Hashem gave us while traveling through the desert. And therefore, says the Bach, it is ma'akev, it is actually essential that one have that in mind. There are those who disagree and say that would not be ma'akev, but nonetheless, one should make every effort when sitting in the sukkos, not only to have intent and recognize that what we are doing is a mitzvah of Hashem, but also that part and parcel of the mitzvah is to remember the Ananei HaKavod, the protection that Hashem gave us as we traveled through the desert. I wish everyone a wonderful Yom Tif, meaningful and opportunity to be together and to grow. Chag Sameach.